I am Neil.
I'm Veronica. We fell in love when we were 16, and here we are talking about what life is all about for us. Thank you for joining us.
This is a Life Is podcast with Neil and Veronica.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life Is with Neil and Veronica, where we love to talk about the different experiences that we have, what they mean to us, and maybe share some stories that go alongside it, and maybe some few laughs along the way. So today, Veronica, what I would like to talk about is life is making adjustments. Now, I'll set the story a little bit here. We, if for those lifers that have noticed, had to take a step back for a little while because life made us adjust a few of our things due to some situations that were ongoing in our family. I'll let you in on a few things. We had two of our children who broke bones over the past few months, and that has caused some life adjustments where we just didn't want to fill our plate with certain things. If you haven't heard that conversation, be sure to check that one out afterwards. So we decided that right now we just need to focus on what we can control, right? And you've heard Veronica and I talk about this, is when there's things in your life that are out of your control, focusing on what you can control is what is best. And sometimes that calls for some adjustments. Sometimes that calls for you to adjust what you normally might expect out of yourself, out of certain other people, out of your relationship, out of your kids, whatever it is for you. And I guess, like, first and foremost, I'll speak to this first, is I had to adjust my expectations and maybe my, thoughts of what a young 4-year-old could do with a broken wrist in a capacity of, what they could handle emotionally, even though they couldn't tell us what they were going through. And, through conversations with you, Veronica, who I think has a really good pulse on what our kids need and want and should get, right? Like, you're their, I guess, bar setter, and from a parental perspective, we had some great conversations about we just need to adjust what we're expecting and really just need to get through those 4 weeks. And in the end, it's not going to change who or what she truly expects, if we give her a freezy before dinner, once in a while. Right. And like, as a basic example, as one of the things that you threw out there. Right. And so we made those adjustments, and we've, again, now that we can say we've passed those 4 weeks, have adjusted back to certain things slowly but surely to try and get back into what we would want as a regular routine or, boundaries that we would want. And so that's one thing that from this we talked about really is making those adjustments. And the other thing that we had is, we adjusted some of the stuff that we had in our house, whether it was things that we no longer served a purpose, right? It had its place, it had its time, it served its purpose and brought us joy, but it's just something that we need to let go. And you went through this exercise with our oldest daughter, and it was very, very therapeutic for her and for us to see that adjustment for what we carried with us. There were some furniture adjustments in our home. There was some adjustments to our layout, like basic layout of our home. And the feelings that we got from those small adjustments, or big maybe for some people, was 10, 20, for me, 30 times the difference when we made those adjustments, and just having the same home with, the same basic stuff. It just felt differently when we adjusted certain things. So that's a little bit of what's happened around us right now in the past 2 months. And so really, when you think about some of these things and having to make adjustments in certain directions, it's really within your control to make those and to really start to guide yourself in an uncontrollable environment sometimes.
I feel like when you're talking about adjustments, they're absolutely necessary, no matter what you're talking about. I feel like, you could be talking about us as individuals, our relationship, anything that we embark on, anything that we take on, anything that we're learning, and definitely to what life was for us, even like over the course of the past summer, like this past summer, leading into the fall. And so Neil had mentioned 2 of our kiddos had broken bones. It started with our oldest daughter. She broke a finger. And you think like, it's not on her dominant hand. It's part of her finger. Like, how bad could this possibly be? And it was like 6 weeks. Like when we talk about adjustments, there were a ton of adjustments that we had to make, that she had to make. Our planned summer of our water park season pass of lots of fun in the sun and all sorts of things, like as a small snippet of the summer, was no longer. And, she was definitely like grieving the loss of her summer. And then finally, she gets that splint taken off. She's healed. I think literally not 7 days had passed, and we get a call from the school that our youngest suspected, to have broken her wrist. And yes, took her to the hospital, all that stuff. We'll save all of that story because it's not really relevant. But yes, then she broke her wrist. And then this was actually her dominant hand. They're learning a ton of stuff in school at this age. They're learning all of their writing and everything else, tons of adjustments. And actually, so, we adjusted as a family. You have to adjust plans. You have to adjust all sorts of things. I had to adjust, like Neil mentioned, our reaction to things. And they had to do adjusting as individuals themselves, and, adapting to certain situations. So kids are just different. We're all different. And seeing how they had adjusted and reacted to different things was also, I feel like, really interesting. Definitely for me as a mom. I don't know if Neil has reflections on that, but really solidified, we are all different. Sometimes age doesn't matter. Sometimes just like our coping mechanisms are different. Our baselines are different. And so, yeah, tons of adjustments had to be made this past little while. And, if we could give ourselves that message of like, you have to be kind to yourself and adjusting's okay. And like I mentioned, though, it does have to do with everything. For some reason, Neil, when you said like making adjustments, yes, there was like, these big things that happened in life. Thankfully, temporary. Thankfully, could be healed, that we would get through it and past it. But like, and maybe this is a squirrely thought in the moment, but when I think about adjustments, I was thinking about even, as we're talking about self, health, and wealth. And I feel like since Neil and I have been together since we were 16, and prior to that, I was always embarking on something different for nutrition, exercise, eating, all sorts of things. And so I was always trying something else. But I always had to make adjustments. And, even most recently, I feel like I'm getting better at that and learning like what feels right for me, what doesn't. And I thought, okay, and I wonder if like, people that I have been kind of surrounded around in the last little while, they know that at one point I was like, I'm going to do 30 days of wall Pilates. It's going to be great. I'm going to love it. We're all going to do this together. And like, bless the amazing souls that like, were like, yeah, this is fantastic. I'm totally going to hop on this with you. This is great. We'll use each other as accountability. Well, you know what? My body did not like wall Pilates. in fact, it told me loud and clear that like wall Pilates is not for me. And it wasn't even like intensity. It was, I can't even tell you exactly what it was, but I will tell you that it was not for me. I had to make adjustments. And in fact, when we're talking about adjustments, I actually quit it altogether, which I think some people were like, she just totally dropped off the face of whatever with that. But you have to make adjustments. And even within, you have to make adjustments. Neil and I were doing an exercise the other day, right? And we're like starting off with like a certain amount of weight. And like midway through, sometimes we were going down to a lower weight, we were making adjustments. And that's okay. So lots of different things in life call for adjustments, totally necessary. And I think we're adjusting throughout the day, every day.
Yeah, especially when you get a phone call that you have to adjust your schedule to go pick up a child who needs to be taken to the hospital, right? Like that was the first of the adjustments. And I think that, adjustments don't, like you said, have to be big. They can be big or small, sorry. And really, what's best for you, right? And you talk about that wall Pilates, right? It's not that you like were quitting wall Pilates or that you didn't want to, start a new program for exercise, right? It's just how the workout was developed did not suit your body the best, right? It puts you into a flight or flight response, basically. And it created an environment that was not conducive to other beneficial things, right? It was completely the opposite of what it needed to do, right? And so you made the adjustment to find things that were of, goodness for your body, right? Like you had to know specifically and you had to learn and adjust to what your body likes from, who you are and what you've grown up to become. And so, that's just a basic story, right? Like that, again, is something that you need to learn about yourself. You need to learn about that in your relationships, right? You need to make those adjustments, big, medium, or small. And really, again, knowing what's best for you is all that you can do. And when you make those adjustments, really, it's not to say that you can't go back once you've made those adjustments to doing something similar or to whatever it is, right? Because like we said, in our situation, our adjustments were temporary, but we had to make them for that time frame to suit what was going on, right? So it wasn't a permanent adjustment, but so again, adjustments, big, medium, small, but they can be temporary or they can be permanent or they can whatever, that there's no set time frame for these, right? It's really, I guess, being aware of what you need at any given time. And when things from outside of your control are handed to you, is what adjustments can you control to make your situation suit you for what you need. And I'm sure people can now think about adjustments that they've made in the past, because as you touched on, Veronica, we're making these probably on a daily basis, maybe without even knowing. Maybe we're just making adjustments on autopilot and we're not really thinking or giving ourselves credit for what we are adjusting. Like, I'm sure there's examples that if we sat back and thought about it, that we're doing each and every day. And really just knowing that you're controlling what you're doing and when you're doing it and what's best for you.
Well, it's because like we're not static. We're always changing. Things are always changing. Variables are changing. Sometimes our lifestyle changes or circumstances change. And so it's just necessary. It's just something that we need to do. And I mean, sometimes adjustments can be expected. Sometimes they're unexpected. And sometimes you're tailoring it to something that you want. Like we talk about food a lot. Somehow these analogies always come up. And in talking about adjustments, it's even like, sometimes you get like a baseline for a recipe idea. And sometimes you're like, I love garlic. I measure that stuff with my heart. Like, I love chocolate chips. I measure that with my heart. I'm not like 1 tablespoon, You're like, I'm adjusting that. I mean, it's my recipe now. So I'm adding in 2 cups versus 1 tablespoon, like whatever. But that's the thing. And actually, Neil's like, I feel like, Veronica, you're on Chopped. I can, either say like, ooh, like a good recipe that we want to make, or just give you like a thing of ingredients and like away you go. So like, I really like to cook a lot. And the one thing though is that because I make so many adjustments all the time to every single recipe, and because I am so squirrely and I don't always write the adjustments down right away, I kind of forget what I do. And it turns out, usually I want to say, I mean, like really well. Neil's always like, this was the best thing ever. And I was like, I made a whole bunch of adjustments and people are always asking for the recipe. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I don't know. Like, I know I use like garlic and butter and salt, and I'm like, I just taste things and adjust as we go. So anyways, all to say, Neil will be like, so what'd you do? And then the next time I try and make the same recipe, I'm like, I don't remember what I did to adjust. But then I make new adjustments and more adjustments, and then sometimes it turns out better anyway.
Oh, I'll be the key witness in this is when you make adjustments each and every time, they still turn out fantastic. So I always say to Veronica, like, find a recipe that you get inspires you and just make your adjustments as necessary. And the one thing that I always request on my birthday is Veronica's oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. Okay. They are fantastic. They are my favorite. The kids
They've
know
never been the
this.
same. They've never been the
Exactly.
same.
They've never, so in Veronica's I guess in Veronica's baking eyes, they're never the same 100%. It's not like she works off a set recipe that has to be this way, that I have to have those cookies. But I can tell you from the consumer's point of view that they are always the same quality. They are always the same, high level of deliciousness. So it doesn't matter that you've adjusted, like, trust me, they're great. So even though I'm requesting them and they may not be the exact same, they always turn out to be great.
But I think here's the thing. Okay, thank you. I'm so glad that like you love you love the cookies every year, even though they're different. And I always like I'm literally Googling every year, like best oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. Because here's the thing though, year after year, maybe there's a better recipe out there. But we make adjustments because sometimes you discover something that might be a little bit better, that might enhance something or elevate something. And, when you're talking about recipes, like I'll just let you all in on a little bit of a secret. I don't know why you're laughing. Are you anticipating what I'm going to say? Okay.
No, I have
Okay.
something to share. It's okay.
Okay, but like I'll let you all in on a little recipe secret here is we love browned butter in this household. If you have not baked or cooked with brown butter, please go do it. If you need tips or help, send us a message if you have no idea what I'm talking about. But like honestly, like even brown butter is like one of my favorite smells. And since I cut out dairy and gluten, it's just like kind of torture for me. But here's the thing, there's an adjustment that I made and I started using brown butter. So I would argue that it's made it better. And now I feel like it's Neil's turn because I don't know, clearly something I said made him laugh. So I feel like you have a story.
Well, I'll go back to the birthday oatmeal chocolate chip cookies and the in the moment adjustment we had to make when our our warm baked cookies melted the candles. So Veronica made, and the kids made this lovely, like, larger oatmeal chocolate chip cookie as like a cake, let's say, right? Because I didn't want cake, I just wanted cookies. So like, well, how are we gonna how are we gonna celebrate and give Daddy candles so that we can sing Happy Birthday? Well, the candles went into the warm chocolate chip cookies because, of course, like, it's much easier to put a candle in a warm cookie than it is a cooled cookie because it gets harder, right? Like it solidifies. Well,
That
what we
was my
didn't plan for,
logic.
what we had, pardon me,
That was my logic. I was like, I
right?
mean,
And
there's fresh baked cookies.
it's 100% valid, like logistically valid, right? I would have thought the exact same thing. Well, here's the adjustment we had to make. The candles wax began to melt into the cookies, and not only into the cookies but onto the cooking sheet below it. And so Veronica had to quickly adjust how this was going to happen. We did have some casualties. We did lose some cookies. It's okay. You saved a lot of them. Like, I would say, you withdrew some of the cookies that had the wax in it. But
Okay.
yeah, there's in moment adjustments that we had to make. Sorry, that's why I was laughing.
No, but I have to like pause you there for a visualization. For those of you that have seen Sleeping Beauty, okay, and you know when the fairies were like making their cake and the candles, and you can picture them, for those of you that have seen this, like the candles are like melting off the cake in every direction possible. Okay, so the fresh cookies come out of the oven, and the kids are so cute. And because okay, we'll let you in on another thing. The odd thing is that like no one in our family really likes cake for their birthday. So Neil doesn't like cake. So if you're ever thinking of getting him something, don't bring him cake or cupcakes. He really likes chocolate chip cookies. So they come fresh out of the oven. Okay. And like, Neil had also requested like burgers and things like that. So also cooking at the same time. And if you can picture like the Muppet Chef in the kitchen, sometimes that's me, right? Like I'm trying to multitask and Neil's like one before two. And I'm like, you can't really do that sometimes when like you're cooking and baking and doing all the things. So I take the cookies out of the oven and they are piping hot on stoneware, no less. Okay. Now looking back in hindsight, which of course hindsight is 2020. You think wax, hot, melting, like that's that's logical. Okay, so hot cookies, but in that moment my logic, like Neil had mentioned, is that like, oh, warm moldable cookies, easier to stick a candle in. So the kids are so sweet. They come on over, they're helping me stick candles in. And if you can picture like a slightly larger cookie, they wanted to put like the full numbers of like candles on there, like in the shape of these numbers. Okay. So we're not talking like 3 candles. We're literally talking like the Sleeping Beauty cake filled with candles in this cookie. And I feel like I turned around. I don't know what the time lapse was, but I feel like I turned around, flipped some burger patties, got some bread ready in our toaster. And I look over to the pan and I'm pretty sure I like gasped in shock / started laughing / tried to grab a spatula at the same time to like, I like panicked, tried to save these cookies because these candles were like in every which direction. And I was confused that like the cookie just wasn't holding up the candle at first. I'm like, okay, this is not really working. And I'm trying to like adjust these candles that are in every which direction now, which then brought me to realize that there was wax like puddles of wax on the stoneware. I'm trying to salvage these cookies and like push them to the side and cut around like the little, circular candle wax thing. And, maybe if we would have used like 2 candles instead of like 50 candles, no, Neil didn't turn 50, but like, all these numbers of candles that like the kids wanted to put in. Anyways, so yeah, definitely an adjustment, definitely a learning opportunity. And that's a thing too. with adjustment comes learning, because you're going to learn whether something works or not, right? Like, it brings me back to when Neil and I were in science together in grade 9, and it was like, what's your hypothesis? What do you think is going to happen? What's like your best guess of how that's going to turn out? And so when you make adjustments, it is sometimes an educated or a best guess or a random guess. And, who knows the outcome sometimes. And sometimes it's multiple adjustments or multiple micro adjustments. But speaking of Neil's birthday, actually, part of a gift that we got him were these 2 shaker cups, because Neil starts his day every day with like greens and all these things, which some of my friends like to call Hulk juice. They do the same thing. I don't know if I shared that with you or not, Neil. Anyways, so on the side of the cup, one of our lovely neighbors had customized it to say self, health, and wealth. I think I can't remember the order. And then the other one says life is for our podcast. But I feel like adjustments is also something that you've done recently for yourself in many different ways. And incremental adjustments are okay too, right? Like there's no thing, I guess, that makes like an adjustment like better than or less than or whatever it is, as long as you're in charge of that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I have adjusted like my expectations of like what I want to get out of, whether it's exercise or the food that I'm eating or, the activity, like healthy activity that I'm doing, right? Like I've had to adjust like what I want and what I'm going to do and really, again, like you said, just own it um for what I want from it. And when it comes to adjustments too, you're talking about learning from it and growing from it. But I think too is with adjustments, as we can again, when you talked about science and stuff like that, it made me think about relying on your peers or your group that you have, right? Like your trusted 5 or 1 or 2, however many you want to pick. But really, if you're going to make or need to make adjustments, is maybe they have experience and they can shed some light on their learnings and help you make a decision that best suits your situation, right? Not just necessarily say that you have to do the same adjustments, but maybe they can speed up some of the learning for you in a sense of like, okay, well, I can maybe make this adjustment, see how it works because it's worked for somebody else, or like I can use part of their adjustments, whatever it is, right? And so you don't have to necessarily make that adjustment all on your own unless you truly want to. So that's what I sort of was thinking there when you talked about, science and hypothesis and all that fun that goes along with it is, there can be a whole community that can help you make those adjustments and whatnot. And we had a lot of, support for each other in our most recent adjustments with the kids, right? Because it was, it turned out to be quite the adjustment, and not only for them individually, but I think for us as parents and sort of, we had to lean on each other even more than normal. And I think, for me, even more than I expected, right? Like, this is obviously the first time that we had gone through a significant injury of any kind, one that really caused a lot of adjustments, like you said, whether it was what activities they could do or couldn't do, right? And so yeah, like unless you really want to, don't feel like you have to make those adjustments on your own. There are people that you can rely on. So yeah, I think that it yeah, thanks for again just sharing the story about the cookies, because that made me have a good laugh. And no, I did not turn 50, but that's okay. Unless that makes me look really young. I'm just kidding. I don't really care.
All your adjustments that you've made, though, have made you healthier. So I think actually
Yeah.
we were talking and reflecting on how this is probably your healthiest birthday yet, in a sense, right?
Well, yes, absolutely. And, we're coming to the last few months of the year, and I look back to last December when we started this podcast, as you touched on, with my health, myself, and my wealth, and that was my three sort of buckets that I wanted to pour into this year. And I can, reflect back on that as we get closer to the end of the year. But I can say, without a doubt, that in all three of those, I'm truly feeling grateful and happy for where I'm at in all three of those. And a lot of that has to do with the sharing that we do on this podcast. A lot of that has to do with the support that, obviously you give me, Veronica. And a lot of it has to do with just what my mindset was for certain things, right? And we can start to touch on those in different episodes, because you can begin to talk about a lot of different things when you talk about living your best life, let's say, right? And life is worth living in a sense. So more to come, I'm sure, on those sort of topics as we get into more episodes. But yes, life is all about making adjustments, and you can always learn from them. And so thank you for allowing us to make the adjustments to come back to this regular, episodes that we love to share with you, to give you the insights and stories, and hopefully some laughs along the way. I know that I had quite a few today. So thank you, as always, for joining us, for sharing this, for being here with us, for being part of this life community. And just know that life is better with all of you. And we look forward to speaking with you again next time.